What would happen if the world's most influential tech entrepreneur, known for shaking up industries and defying conventions, suddenly found himself in the most unexpected of places, a courtroom? A place where, instead of dictating the rules, he was bound by them. And what if his presence in that very courtroom led to a dramatic showdown that no one saw coming? The scene was set. The courtroom was packed to the brim with journalists, lawyers, and curious onlookers, all awaiting the next big twist in what had already become a high-profile case. News outlets around the world were reporting live, cameras flashing every second, capturing the tense atmosphere that hung over the room like a storm cloud. This wasn't just any case, this was Elon Musk's trial. The man who had revolutionized the electric car industry, the man who launched rockets into space, the man who made headlines not just for his achievements but for his controversies, Elon Musk was about to face accusations that could cost him more than just his reputation. As the judge, a stern middle-aged man with glasses perched on the tip of his nose, called the court to order, the silence that followed was almost deafening. Every eye in the room was fixed on the figure sitting at the defendant's table, Elon Musk. His usual confident, almost unshakable demeanor seemed a little different today. His face was calm, but there was something more guarded about him, as if he was preparing for something that was beyond his control. The stakes were high. Musk stood accused of defrauding investors by making misleading statements about his companies, statements that could have driven stock prices up or down based on the public's perception. The case had captured the attention of the nation, not only because of Musk's celebrity status but because of the implications it had for the future of tech giants and the very nature of business in the digital age. Musk had remained largely silent up until this point. His legal team had worked tirelessly to prepare for the trial, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. Despite being a master of social media and someone who was used to answering questions from the public, Musk's silence in this courtroom spoke volumes. Was it arrogance? Was it strategy? Or was it something deeper, a realization that no matter how much he had achieved, there was something beyond his control that he had to face now? Mr. Musk, the judge's voice broke through the silence, the prosecution will now present its opening statement. The prosecutor, a tall woman in a dark blue suit, stood with an air of confidence as she stepped forward. She glanced at Musk, then turned to the jury with a professional smile. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, today, you will hear evidence that shows Mr. Musk, one of the most powerful men in the world, used his influence to manipulate the market for personal gain. What he did, however, wasn't just a financial misstep, it was a deliberate act that cost millions, if not billions, of dollars in damages. And today, we will prove it. There it was. The opening shot fired. Musk, who had built an empire on the back of revolutionary ideas, now faced the full force of the law. The prosecution's statement was met with murmurs from the courtroom, but Musk didn't flinch. He sat there, unmoving, eyes forward. His mind, no doubt, was 100 miles away, calculating the best possible move. But then, there was a twist, a shift in the atmosphere that no one had anticipated. The defense lawyer, a seasoned attorney with years of experience in corporate law, rose to her feet. She was ready. As the jury leaned in, she delivered a statement that caught everyone off guard. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you will soon see is not a man who manipulated the truth. What you will witness is a man who dared to think differently. A man who, yes, made bold claims, but who also made those claims in an effort to change the world. And I assure you, nothing he did was done with malicious intent. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Musk had always been a visionary, a man who thrived on challenging norms, and for the first time in this trial, his defense lawyer had framed him not as a villain but as a pioneer. The question was, would the jury see it that way? As the opening statements came to a close, Musk's silence was palpable. It was as if the entire courtroom was holding its breath, waiting for him to make a move. Would he speak now? Would he rise to defend himself? But no, Musk remained seated, his gaze fixed firmly ahead. The tension was suffocating. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, with the heat rising with every passing moment. Musk's legal team huddled around him, whispering quietly. His face remained expressionless. The courtroom's focus was completely on him, on what he would do next. The trial, a media spectacle like no other, had only just begun. But already, the room was brimming with uncertainty. No one knew what to expect next, but one thing was certain: Elon Musk's presence in this courtroom was far from ordinary. His reputation, his company's, and perhaps even his freedom were on the line. And as the day unfolded, Musk's calm exterior would be put to the ultimate test. "Mr. Musk," the judge's voice cut through the room again. "Are you ready to proceed with your testimony?" The entire room went still. Everyone was waiting for Musk's response. And then, for the first time, Musk broke his silence. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, yet with an underlying intensity that no one had expected. The room held its breath. The world watched. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The world knew Elon Musk as a visionary entrepreneur, a man who had reshaped industries, challenged the boundaries of technology, and dared to dream beyond the stars. But behind the headlines, behind the boardrooms and press conferences, there was a man with a complex past, one that shaped the decisions he made, the risks he took, and the relentless drive that kept him going. In the courtroom, Musk wasn't just facing a legal battle, he was facing his own demons, his own journey that had brought him to this moment. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon Musk's childhood was far from ordinary. His parents, May and Errol Musk, were intelligent and ambitious, but their marriage was strained. Musk's early years were marked by a sense of isolation. His parents' tumultuous relationship left him with a feeling of not quite belonging. The young Elon spent hours buried in books, often reading about science, engineering, and technology. His obsession with understanding how things worked was both a way to escape the confusion of his home life and a manifestation of his natural curiosity. At the age of 12, Musk created and sold a video game called Blaster, a simple space-themed game. This early venture was a small, but significant indicator of Musk's future. He had always believed that ideas could be the key to changing the world, a belief that would later propel him into the world of Silicon Valley and beyond. But success didn't come easily. In fact, Musk's journey was filled with rejection, failure, and hardship. After moving to Canada at the age of 17 to attend Queen's University, Elon experienced the cultural shock of leaving his home country. The transition wasn't easy. There were financial struggles, language barriers, and a deep sense of not fitting in. But Musk's determination never wavered. It was in those early years that his resolve was forged. He eventually transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, where he pursued degrees in both economics and physics, two fields that would lay the groundwork for his future ventures. After graduation, Musk faced an uncertain future. He didn't take the traditional path of seeking employment at an established company. Instead, he sought out the future. He co-founded Zip2, a software company that helped newspapers create online city guides. Musk and his brother Kimball worked tirelessly to grow the company, and it wasn't long before they sold Zip2 for $307 million in 1999. This sale marked the first of many high-stakes gambles Musk would take in his career. But the money wasn't enough for him. Musk wasn't interested in wealth for its own sake, he had bigger dreams. The sale of Zip2 set the stage for what would become his next venture, PayPal, a company that revolutionized online payments. With PayPal, Musk once again defied expectations. The company grew rapidly, and within a few years, PayPal was acquired by eBay for $1.5 billion in stock. Musk walked away with $165 million, but he didn't stop there. Instead of resting on his laurels, he sought out new, even more ambitious goals. It was during this period that Musk's ambition began to take on a life of its own. While many would have been content to retire at a young age with such an incredible fortune, Musk was just getting started. He began envisioning a future where humanity could thrive beyond Earth. His passion for space exploration led him to create SpaceX, a company that would change the course of space travel forever. However, SpaceX's journey wasn't smooth sailing. In its early years, SpaceX faced multiple failed launches and near bankruptcy. But Musk, ever the risk-taker, poured more of his personal fortune into the company. The press painted him as a man who was willing to risk it all. And, in 2008, SpaceX's Falcon 1 rocket successfully launched, making history as the first privately funded liquid-fueled rocket to reach orbit. This was a pivotal moment in Musk's career, one that solidified his reputation as a visionary and cemented his place in the history of space exploration. While SpaceX was gaining momentum, Musk's other ventures were also evolving. In 2003, he had co-founded Tesla Motors, a company that would become synonymous with electric vehicles. Tesla, like SpaceX, faced its own share of failures. There were production delays, financial struggles, and widespread skepticism. Yet, Musk's unwavering belief in the future of clean energy and his commitment to making electric cars mainstream kept the company afloat. Tesla's breakthrough came in 2012 with the launch of the Model S, a car that not only looked beautiful but also redefined what electric vehicles could be. Musk wasn't just selling a car, he was selling a vision where electric cars could rival traditional combustion engines in terms of performance, safety, and style. By the time Musk found himself in the courtroom today, he had built an empire, not just of businesses, but of dreams. His name had become synonymous with innovation. He had proven the world wrong time and time again. But success, as Musk knew all too well, came with its own set of challenges. Musk's personal life had also been under scrutiny. His marriages, his relationships with his children, and his sometimes erratic behavior on social media had all drawn public attention. He had become a polarizing figure, someone who inspired both adoration and disdain in equal measure. To some, he was a genius, a hero, and a modern-day Tony Stark. To others, he was a reckless billionaire with too much influence and too little regard for the consequences of his actions. But in the courtroom, none of that mattered. Musk wasn't there to defend his personal life or his public persona. He was there because he had made a mistake, or at least, that's what the prosecution believed. The trial was about something bigger than his legacy or his vision for the future. It was about accountability. As Musk sat in the defendant's chair, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. From the boy who had created a video game to the man who had sent rockets into space, every decision had led to this moment. He had always been willing to take risks, to push boundaries. But now, he was faced with the consequences of those very actions. His legal team had told him to stay calm, to not let the pressure get to him. But Musk knew the truth: no matter how this trial turned out, it would change the way the world viewed him. It would change the way he viewed himself. And so, as the trial continued to unfold, Musk sat there, silent, calculating, and ready for whatever came next. Because he knew one thing for sure: this was just another challenge to overcome. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, the weight of the case pressing down on everyone like a heavy fog. The jury sat still, their eyes darting between Elon Musk and the defense team, unsure of what to expect next. The courtroom had become more than just a place for legal proceedings. It had turned into an arena where the world's most high-profile tech mogul was fighting not just for his reputation but for the very principles that had made him the icon he was. The prosecution's case was methodical, each witness they brought forward seeming to chip away at the fortress Musk had built. The room buzzed with every piece of evidence they presented. Screens flashed with stock charts, emails, and even text messages, all of which seemed to point to one glaring accusation: Musk had used his influence and platform irresponsibly, causing widespread financial damage. But Musk remained stoic. His expression was unreadable, as if the prosecution's words were nothing more than background noise. His legal team, led by the seasoned attorney Sarah Thompson, was doing their best to maintain control of the narrative, countering each accusation with calm, strategic rebuttals. Still, it was clear that the tension in the room was escalating. Musk was on the defensive, and though his outward composure was flawless, there was an undeniable sense of discomfort creeping in. His lawyers had reassured him that they were prepared for this, but Musk knew something the team didn't: the stakes in this case weren't just financial. They were personal. It wasn't the first time Musk had been thrust into a public battle like this. His Twitter controversies, his statements about Tesla's future, and his relentless drive to push boundaries had all led to public clashes before. But this? This was different. The courtroom was a place where the rules weren't set by him. This was a battle of the law, and it was more unforgiving than any Silicon Valley boardroom. Mr. Musk, the prosecutor began, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade, can you explain to the jury why you made the statements you did regarding Tesla's stock price in 2018? Your words caused the stock to spike, leading to massive profits for you and your investors. How do you justify this? The question hung in the air, an accusation wrapped in legal language. Musk could feel every eye in the room on him. He didn't flinch, but inside, he knew this was a turning point. It was the moment where he would either regain control of the narrative or watch it slip away entirely. He stood up slowly, his movements deliberate. The room seemed to hold its breath as Musk adjusted his suit jacket and took the stand. His calmness was unnerving, and the jury could feel the undercurrent of tension in his every word. Let me clarify something, Musk began, his voice firm but measured. What I said in 2018 was not intended to mislead anyone. It was an optimistic statement about the future of Tesla. I was, and still am, passionate about the company's mission. I had a vision for what Tesla could achieve. That vision was based on facts, on progress we had made, and on the confidence I had in my team. I didn't make those statements lightly, but I also didn't think they would have the kind of impact the prosecution is suggesting. A few murmurs rippled through the room. Musk's words were calculated, precise, but there was something behind them, something the jury would have to decide whether to trust. Could they buy the argument that Musk, for all his brilliance, had simply been too optimistic? Or was there something more to it? The prosecutor wasn't done. She was relentless. And yet, Mr. Musk, the very next day after you made those statements, Tesla's stock jumped nearly 11%. Do you still stand by your claim that it was nothing more than optimism? Do you not see how that could have influenced not only your investors, but the public as well? Musk paused for a moment, taking a breath. The question was valid, but Musk wasn't the kind of person who shied away from a challenge. The truth is, he said, I've always believed in Tesla. Every step we've taken, from the first Roadster to the Model S, has been about proving that electric cars can be the future of transportation. My statements were an extension of that belief, not an attempt to manipulate stock prices. The defense attorney, Sarah Thompson, stood up and motioned for the judge to allow Musk to continue. Your Honor, the witness is giving context to his actions, she said, her tone calm but assertive. The judge nodded, allowing Musk to speak freely. I'm not perfect, Musk continued, his voice gaining momentum. And I've made mistakes, lots of them. But I don't manipulate the market for personal gain. I've risked my own money, my own reputation, to make Tesla what it is today. I've pushed the boundaries of what's possible, even when others doubted me. And I will continue to do so. It was in that moment, as Musk stood there in front of the jury, that something changed. The room shifted from a tense courtroom to something more akin to a standoff. The jury was no longer just listening to legal arguments, they were witnessing Musk's essence, his unshakable belief in himself and his vision. Some were swayed, their skepticism waning as they listened to Musk's passionate words. Others, however, remained uncertain, unsure of whether his conviction was born from genuine belief or from the sheer force of his persona. The prosecutor shot a glance at her team before leaning forward, pressing Musk further. But Mr. Musk, you're not just a man with a vision. You're a billionaire CEO, someone whose actions have far-reaching consequences. Your words, whether intentional or not, have the power to move markets. And that is what we're here to examine, whether you use that power recklessly. Musk's eyes narrowed slightly, his jaw tightening. I've never acted recklessly. I've taken risks, yes. But recklessness is not part of the equation. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, the atmosphere thick with uncertainty. Each word Musk spoke was carefully measured, but the questions continued to come. The tension in the room was rising with every exchange. Musk had managed to maintain control, but for how long? As the session continued, it was clear that this trial would be far from straightforward. Musk's defense was strong, but the prosecution had their sights set on proving something much deeper. And as the day drew to a close, everyone in that courtroom knew one thing: this case would not just shape Musk's future, but it would shape the future of corporate accountability in the tech world. The stage was set. The battle had only just begun. The trial had already reached a fever pitch, and the entire courtroom was on edge. The exchanges between Musk's legal team and the prosecution had been fierce, with each side digging in, their arguments intensifying with every passing day. But in an instant, everything changed. It was the third day of the trial, and the afternoon session had just begun. Musk, looking calm but clearly exhausted from the relentless questioning, was once again in the defendant's chair. He had expected the usual barrage of questions, the same tactical legal maneuvers, but what came next took everyone by surprise. The prosecution, having built their case around Musk's influence over Tesla's stock price and his ability to manipulate the market, was preparing to introduce a new line of questioning. But before they could proceed, the courtroom doors suddenly swung open with a loud bang. A figure stepped into the room, and the entire atmosphere shifted. It was a well-known Wall Street figure, Robert Lang, a major investor in Tesla who had been both a supporter and a critic of Musk in the past. Lang had held significant shares in Tesla, and his role in the company's financial affairs was well documented. However, no one had anticipated that Lang would be called to testify, let alone that he would arrive unannounced in the middle of the trial. For a brief moment, the room was still, as if the air had been sucked out of it. All eyes turned to Lang, whose expression was unreadable. He moved to the witness stand without hesitation, his sharp suit and confident demeanor commanding attention. Musk's gaze locked on Lang for a moment, a flicker of something crossing his face, perhaps recognition, or perhaps an inkling of the storm that was about to unfold. He had worked with Lang in the past, and their relationship had always been complicated. The man was unpredictable, a wild card in the financial world, and his appearance could either be a lifeline or a ticking time bomb. "Your Honor," Lang began, his voice smooth and measured, "I have important information regarding Tesla's stock movements that I believe is crucial to this case." The prosecutor's eyes lit up, clearly excited. They had not anticipated Lang's testimony and had no idea what he was about to say. Musk's legal team, on the other hand, exchanged uneasy glances. The unpredictability of Lang was a wild card they had hoped to avoid. Lang continued, unfazed by the attention now focused entirely on him. "I've been an investor in Tesla for over a decade. I've seen the highs and the lows. I've worked closely with Elon Musk, and I can tell you, without a shadow of a doubt, that the accusations against him are not only misleading, they're fundamentally wrong." The courtroom seemed to collectively hold its breath as Lang's words settled into the air. The prosecutor shot a quick, almost desperate look at her team, while Musk's defense attorneys immediately began whispering among themselves. Lang didn't stop there. "The truth is," he continued, his eyes briefly meeting Musk's across the room, "Elon Musk has never manipulated the market. The stock price, the volatility, everything that has happened with Tesla's financials, it wasn't about Elon Musk making erratic statements. It was the result of market forces, of external factors, and yes, even investor speculation. But Musk? He's always been focused on the long-term goal. The future of the company." Musk's chest tightened as he listened, the words hitting him in an unexpected way. Here was someone who had been in the trenches with him, someone who understood the complexities of Tesla's rise, and yet, no one had expected Lang to speak up in his defense. To have a powerful figure from Wall Street directly challenge the prosecution's claims was, in many ways, a game-changer. The prosecutor, trying to regain control, stood up and quickly interrupted. "Mr. Lang, are you suggesting that the market is entirely out of Musk's control? That his statements, public tweets, and actions had no impact on Tesla's stock value?" Lang smirked slightly, his gaze unwavering. "No, I'm not saying that. Of course, Musk's influence is significant. But you're overlooking the fact that Musk's public persona and vision for Tesla have always been a catalyst for excitement. The real question is whether that excitement was ever a deliberate manipulation. And I can tell you it wasn't. Musk's eyes narrowed as he took in Lang's words. There was an unspoken understanding between them, something only the two of them knew. Lang's testimony was not just about defending Musk, it was a veiled critique of the prosecution's entire premise. The courtroom was now buzzing with whispers. The judge, sensing the shift in momentum, called for order, demanding that Lang finish his statement. The truth, Lang said, his tone calm but resolute, is that what the prosecution is accusing Musk of is the kind of sensationalism that makes headlines, not the kind of financial misconduct that actually happens. It's easy to point fingers and blame one person for a stock price spike. But the reality is far more complicated. The market is driven by a combination of factors: investor confidence, innovation, and sometimes, just good timing. As Lang finished his statement, Musk exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The tension in the room had shifted dramatically. The defense had been bolstered by an unexpected ally, a powerful investor who knew the true nature of Tesla's financial world better than anyone else. The prosecution's case, which had been building steadily, now seemed to stumble. Lang's testimony was a potent reminder that there was more to the story than simple market manipulation. The jury, for the first time since the trial began, looked uncertain. The doubt that had started to cloud their judgment was now fully realized. Musk's legal team quickly moved to capitalize on this turn of events. Sarah Thompson, ever the strategist, stood up and approached Lang with a few carefully phrased questions that highlighted the inconsistencies in the prosecution's arguments. Lang's support had shifted the tide, and now it was up to the defense to ensure the jury saw the full picture. But Musk, though relieved, knew that the battle wasn't over. Lang's sudden appearance had certainly thrown the prosecution off balance, but they weren't going to give up so easily. The trial was far from won. In fact, Musk felt an ominous weight settle on his shoulders. He had won a small victory in this moment, but the real test lay ahead. This case wasn't just about defending his actions, it was about defending the very essence of his legacy. As the session adjourned for the day, Musk stood up and walked toward his legal team. His mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. Robert Lang's testimony had given him a much-needed reprieve, but it also raised questions he hadn't anticipated. Who could he trust in this high-stakes game? And more importantly, what would happen next? The day after Robert Lang's unexpected testimony, the courtroom was buzzing with speculation. News outlets were already running headlines about Lang's defense of Musk, but inside the courtroom, the atmosphere had changed. The prosecution's team was visibly shaken, their composure starting to fray. They had been so certain of their case, so confident in their ability to unravel Musk's reputation, but now, the weight of Lang's words hung over them like a shadow. Musk, however, was no longer concerned with the daily back and forth of courtroom strategy. There was something deeper at play now. He had been through his fair share of public scrutiny, but this was different. This wasn't just about a single statement or a single tweet. This was about the future of everything he had built. Tesla, SpaceX, and all the ventures that had defined his life, they were all at risk. As the trial continued, Musk's thoughts drifted to the early days of his career. He remembered the first time he spoke to a crowd about electric cars, the excitement that buzzed through him as he presented his vision for the future. He remembered the struggles, the countless failures, and the relentless drive to succeed that had gotten him to where he was. Musk wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for the world he wanted to build, a world where clean energy and technological innovation weren't just ideas but realities. But now, in this courtroom, it felt as if every ounce of his past was being questioned. He had built a future based on his values, on his belief that anything was possible with enough drive and ambition. And yet, in this very room, those same values were being used against him. As he sat quietly in the defendant's chair, his hands clenched in his lap, Musk found himself reflecting on the most difficult part of this trial, the personal attacks. It wasn't just about numbers or stocks. It was about the very core of who he was. He wasn't a man simply chasing profits. He was someone with a vision that had never been easy to communicate to others, especially those who saw the world through a more conventional lens. A few seats away, Sarah Thompson, his lead attorney, was carefully reviewing the prosecution's latest motions. She had become a crucial part of Musk's defense, her no-nonsense attitude balancing the chaos of the courtroom. She looked up briefly, catching Musk's eye. "You're doing well, Elon," she said softly, her voice low so only he could hear. "But don't forget, this is about more than just winning in court. It's about showing them who you really are." Musk nodded, though he didn't respond. He wasn't sure if he was ready to reveal that side of himself yet, the vulnerable side. But he knew Sarah was right. He had to let the jury see that the person behind the headlines was someone who had fought tooth and nail for what he believed in. As the morning session began, the prosecutor called another witness to the stand, a financial analyst named Claire Harmon. She was known for her sharp critiques of Musk's business practices, and her testimony was expected to reinforce the prosecution's argument that Musk had manipulated Tesla's stock for personal gain. Claire's voice was calm and measured as she began her testimony. "I've been following Tesla for several years now, and based on my analysis, it's clear that Musk's public statements have had a direct impact on the company's stock prices. His tweets, his offhand remarks, they have created instability in the market, and I believe they were deliberate." Musk's legal team immediately objected, but the judge overruled it, allowing Claire to continue. "I can tell you with certainty that when Musk made those statements about Tesla's production numbers, he knew they would influence stock prices," Claire continued. "The kind of volatility Tesla experiences is not the result of normal market forces. It is the result of Musk's influence." The word struck Musk like a blow to the chest. He had always known that his words carried weight, but hearing it so plainly articulated by Claire made him feel like he was being accused of something much darker. The idea that he might have intentionally manipulated the market felt foreign, like a betrayal of the very principles that had driven him to success. The courtroom grew tense. The jury was listening intently, and even Sarah Thompson seemed to tense up in her seat. This was a turning point. Claire's testimony could either solidify the prosecution's case or give Musk a chance to redeem himself. Musk felt the weight of it all pressing down on him. He could feel his heart racing, the uncertainty creeping in. For the first time in the trial, he felt the full force of the personal stakes, his legacy, his company's, his entire future. But as he sat there, something clicked inside him. This wasn't just about defending himself in a courtroom. This was about defending the principles that had always guided him. The truth that had always motivated him, even in the darkest moments of his career. Without thinking, Musk stood up. The courtroom went silent, every eye on him. He glanced at Sarah, who gave him a quick nod of approval. He walked toward the witness stand, his movements deliberate. "Your Honor, if I may," Musk said, his voice steady but with an edge of emotion, "I'd like to address something directly." The judge looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Proceed, Mr. Musk." Musk turned toward the jury, his gaze scanning their faces. For the first time in the trial, he felt like he wasn't just speaking to his lawyers or the prosecution. He was speaking to these people, men and women who were sitting in judgment of him, trying to understand who he really was. "I understand why you're all here," Musk began, his voice calm but laced with sincerity. "I understand why this case is being brought against me. But I need you to understand something about me, about the way I work. I've never made decisions based on stock prices or the short-term gains of my companies. I've made decisions based on a vision of a future where we don't rely on fossil fuels, a future where humanity is exploring the stars. A future where we make clean, sustainable energy the standard." He paused, letting his words settle into the room. He could see the skepticism in some of the jurors' eyes, but he also saw something else, a flicker of recognition. "I've taken risks, I've made mistakes," Musk continued, his voice gaining strength, "but every single step I've taken has been to build a future that I believe in. A future for all of us. And no, I haven't always been perfect. But I've always believed in what we're doing. And that belief has never wavered. For the first time in days, Musk felt a sense of clarity. His words weren't just a defense, they were a declaration of who he was, a man who had always been driven by a purpose greater than himself. And if that meant taking risks, facing criticism, or enduring this trial, then so be it. He would stand by that purpose. The room was silent for a long moment. It was as though time had stopped. Musk's gaze lingered on the jury, each of them processing what they had just heard. There was no more pretense, no more legal posturing. This was Musk, unfiltered and raw, speaking from the heart. Finally, the judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Musk, thank you. You may return to your seat." As Musk walked back to his chair, he knew that the emotional turning point had arrived. He had just laid bare the truth of who he was. Now, it was up to the jury to decide if they would believe him. The morning after Musk's emotional declaration in court, a palpable shift had occurred in the courtroom. The air was still charged with the weight of his words, and the jury, despite their stoic expressions, seemed to be processing his testimony in ways that hadn't been expected. What had started as a trial focused solely on his business dealings and stock market manipulation now felt more personal, more about Musk as a man than just as a CEO. But as the day wore on, it wasn't Musk's words that would once again take center stage, it was the arrival of an unexpected ally. The prosecution had been relentless in their pursuit of Musk, seeking to frame his public persona as a reckless, manipulative figure, someone who had knowingly and intentionally misled the public and manipulated the stock market for personal gain. They had meticulously crafted their case, bringing in expert witnesses and financial analysts, trying to prove that Musk was the puppet master behind Tesla's every stock fluctuation. But it was about to become clear that the prosecution had underestimated the power of alliances. As the session began, the prosecutor called on yet another witness, this time, a former Tesla executive who had worked with Musk early on in the company's history. The witness, Henry Bradley, had held a senior position in Tesla's finance department before leaving the company years ago under what was described as amicable terms. His appearance on the stand was anticipated to give the prosecution the ammunition they needed to further solidify their case. Bradley took the stand with a sense of gravitas, wearing a suit that was crisp and impeccable. His demeanor was calm, even a little detached, as he addressed the court. Musk's legal team tensed as Bradley began speaking, as they had little reason to believe his testimony would favor their case. "The financial instability that Tesla experienced during my time with the company," Bradley began, his voice steady but tinged with authority, "was not the result of mismanagement by lower-level employees or the market. It was a direct result of Musk's actions. His disregard for conventional financial practices led to several instances of stock volatility, especially with the infamous "funding secured" tweet that has been central to this case." Musk's fingers curled into fists at his sides. The mention of the tweet, the one that had triggered this entire trial, stung once again. It was the very thing that had set the prosecution's case in motion, and hearing it mentioned so bluntly made him feel like a target all over again. Bradley continued, "Musk would make statements that were vague, sometimes ambiguous, and this would lead to an unpredictable surge in stock prices. There were times when I would tell him that his public statements were putting the company's financial stability at risk, but he dismissed those concerns. He was focused on the bigger picture, SpaceX, Tesla, the mission, but that doesn't excuse the impact his actions had on the shareholders, investors, and the market at large." The prosecutor's team exchanged satisfied looks. They had expected this testimony to solidify their case, and so far, it appeared to be working. The jury was listening intently, their eyes never leaving Bradley as he spoke. But then, just as Bradley finished his statement, the defense team made a bold move. Sarah Thompson, Musk's lead attorney, stood up, signaling that she would cross-examine the witness. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Thompson's reputation as a sharp strategist had been well established, but this was her moment to turn the tide. She approached the witness stand with a calm confidence that contrasted sharply with the tension in the room. She was ready to take Bradley apart. "Mr. Bradley," she began, her tone measured, "you've stated that Mr. Musk's public statements were detrimental to Tesla's financial health. But I would like to point out that you have also said that you didn't believe his intentions were malicious. Is that correct?" Bradley hesitated for a moment before nodding. "That's correct. I don't believe Musk's intent was ever to harm the company." Thompson smiled, a subtle but powerful move. "So, what you're telling this court is that Mr. Musk, while unorthodox, acted out of a genuine belief in the long-term success of Tesla. He wasn't trying to manipulate the stock. He was trying to push the company forward, wasn't he?" Bradley shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the questioning. "I would agree that Musk always had a long-term vision, but that doesn't change the fact that his actions had consequences." "Consequences," Thompson repeated, her voice now carrying a hint of sharpness. "Let's talk about those consequences. What if, rather than manipulating stock prices, Mr. Musk was simply trying to rally investors around the vision he had for Tesla? A vision that, as we can all see, has led to groundbreaking advancements in electric vehicles and renewable energy. A vision that has made Tesla the company it is today." Bradley's expression faltered for a moment. He had been caught in a tight spot. Musk's defense wasn't denying the volatility of the stock, instead, they were framing it as a natural result of a visionary who sometimes blurred the lines between ambition and reality. Thompson continued, pressing her advantage. "Isn't it true, Mr. Bradley, that you left Tesla under less than ideal circumstances? And that your departure was more about personal disagreements and frustrations rather than any ethical concerns about Musk's leadership?" The room was silent as Bradley's face tightened. It was clear that Thompson's questioning was hitting close to home. "I left because I didn't agree with some of the decisions Musk was making, but that doesn't mean I believe he acted with malicious intent," Bradley finally said, his voice strained. Thompson's eyes narrowed. "Thank you, Mr. Bradley. No further questions." With that, she returned to her seat, and the courtroom erupted into a buzz of whispers. Bradley's testimony had lost much of its bite. He had been painted as a disgruntled former employee with a personal vendetta, not a credible witness who could definitively prove that Musk had intentionally manipulated the stock market. But the real twist came just as Bradley was about to leave the witness stand. Musk, who had been sitting silently at the defendant's table, stood up. The room froze once more. "I have a question for Mr. Bradley," Musk said, his voice quiet but firm. The judge nodded, giving Musk permission to proceed. Musk turned to Bradley, his eyes locked on him. "You've spoken a lot about my methods, about my public statements, and about how they impacted Tesla's financials. But I want to ask you one thing, did you ever once believe in the vision of Tesla? Did you ever believe that what we were doing, despite the risks and volatility, was worth it?" Bradley opened his mouth to respond but paused. His face betrayed a hint of uncertainty. Musk didn't wait for an answer. He turned to the jury. "I ask you to consider this. Tesla's success wasn't about stock prices. It was about changing the world. And sometimes, to change the world, you have to take risks. You have to move fast. You have to push the limits." Musk's words resonated in the courtroom, echoing a sentiment that had guided him from the beginning of his career. The jury was watching him closely now, and for the first time in the trial, the prosecution appeared rattled. As Bradley left the stand, Musk felt a sense of vindication. He hadn't just won a legal victory. He had found an unexpected ally in the form of his own words, a reminder to the jury that the trial wasn't just about numbers and accusations. It was about a vision that, whether they believed in it or not, had changed the world. The trial had entered its final phase, and the weight of every word, every gesture, seemed to carry more significance than ever. The once unbearable tension in the courtroom had shifted into an almost palpable anticipation. The jury had been hearing from both sides for weeks, and now, it was time for the closing arguments, the moment when everything Musk and his legal team had worked toward would either come together in triumph or collapse in defeat. Musk sat in his chair, his gaze fixed on the front of the courtroom, his mind racing. He had endured this trial for what felt like an eternity. The public scrutiny, the media circus, the endless questioning, it had all taken a toll on him. But he had learned something throughout the process. He had learned just how far he was willing to go to protect the vision that had driven him for decades. And, more importantly, he had learned to confront the personal doubts that had plagued him long before this courtroom battle. As the clock ticked down to the final hours of the trial, Musk felt a sense of finality in the air. No matter what happened in the coming days, the outcome of this trial would have a profound impact on the future of Tesla, SpaceX, and the path he would take moving forward. But it wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about his legacy, how he would be remembered, and whether the world would see him as the visionary he believed himself to be or as the reckless entrepreneur the prosecution had painted him to be. The prosecution team was ready to make its final argument. They had built a strong case, perhaps too strong. With their expert witnesses, financial analysts, and damning testimonies, they had sought to prove that Musk had manipulated the stock market, using his influence and his platform for personal gain at the expense of investors. But, as the defense had shown, the truth was more complicated. Musk's actions, though often impulsive and controversial, were motivated by a grander vision. The prosecution hadn't been able to fully grasp the nuances of his character or the depth of his intentions. As the judge called the courtroom to order, the tension was almost unbearable. The jury had been instructed to focus on the legal facts, on whether Musk's actions had broken the law, not on the larger philosophical questions surrounding his methods. But Musk couldn't help but feel that the trial was becoming more about the person behind the headlines than the legal argument itself. Sarah Thompson, Musk's lead attorney, stood up and addressed the court. Her presence was commanding, and the room seemed to hang on her every word. She had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, refining her arguments, and weaving together the defense that would allow Musk to walk out of this courtroom with his reputation intact. "Your Honor, members of the jury," Thompson began, her voice steady and confident, "we have heard from the prosecution that Mr. Musk is a reckless, manipulative individual who will stop at nothing to push his agenda. They've used every tool at their disposal to try and convince you that he is guilty of intentionally manipulating Tesla's stock. But let's not forget the key point here, intent." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "You see, the prosecution has presented a case based on assumptions. They've assumed that Mr. Musk's tweets, his public statements, and his actions were all part of a carefully orchestrated plan to deceive investors. But what they've failed to do is prove that he intended to deceive anyone. They've failed to prove that he knowingly misled anyone with the sole purpose of gaining financially." Thompson paced back and forth, her gestures purposeful as she addressed the jury. "Mr. Musk's tweets, while unorthodox, have always been about his vision for the future. His statements about Tesla's financial situation weren't about manipulating the stock market, they were about creating a reality. A reality where Tesla is not just a car company but a force for change in the world. A reality where space exploration is no longer science fiction, but a tangible goal for humanity." Her words were measured, but they carried weight. Musk had built his empire on a vision that was often misunderstood, and Thompson had just captured that vision perfectly. He could see the jury listening closely, and for the first time in days, he felt a spark of hope. Thompson's voice grew more intense as she continued. "Yes, Mr. Musk has made mistakes. He's admitted as much. He's taken risks, some of them huge, some of them controversial. But that doesn't make him a criminal. It makes him human. He's someone who has dared to think beyond the conventional, who has fought for what he believes is a better future. And sometimes, in that fight, things get messy." She turned toward the jury, making eye contact with each of them. "But let me ask you this, how many of you have ever made a decision based on your belief in something greater than yourself? How many of you have ever taken a risk, even when others doubted you, because you believed in what you were doing?" The room grew quiet as Thompson's words lingered in the air. It was a simple question, but it carried with it the weight of the entire trial. The jury members shifted in their seats, some nodding slightly, as if they had been given permission to think beyond the legal framework of the trial and consider the broader implications of Musk's actions. Thompson's final words were delivered with quiet conviction. Mr. Musk may not be perfect, but he is not guilty of the charges laid against him. He has not manipulated the stock market for personal gain. He has acted with passion, with vision, and with a belief in the future that many of us may never fully understand. But that doesn't make him a criminal. It makes him a pioneer. She turned to the judge and then to the jury. I ask you to consider the man behind the headlines. The man who built Tesla. The man who's taken humanity to space. The man who's changing the world for the better. Thompson's closing argument echoed through the courtroom, and Musk could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. It was in this moment that everything he had fought for would either be realized or lost. This was the culmination of all the years of hard work, of sacrifice, of belief in something greater than himself. The room was silent as Thompson returned to her seat. The prosecution was up next, but Musk's mind was elsewhere. He was no longer worried about the verdict. He had said everything he needed to say. Now, it was up to the jury to decide. The prosecution's final argument came, but it was almost a blur. They focused on the facts, on the numbers, on the law. They did their best to remind the jury of the severity of Musk's actions, painting him as a man who thought he was above the law, a man who had misled investors for his own gain. But Musk wasn't listening. His thoughts were with the future, the long road ahead, and the impact that this trial would have on the world. When the judge dismissed the court for the day, Musk felt a strange sense of peace. The jury had heard his side of the story, and now, they had the power to decide. As he left the courtroom, he knew that whatever the outcome, he had given everything. The rest, as they say, was out of his hands. The days following the closing arguments were some of the longest of Elon Musk's life. The courtroom was quiet, the tension thick in the air as the jury deliberated. For Musk, every moment stretched into eternity. Despite the polished exterior, he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his stomach. The weight of the trial had worn on him, and now, all he could do was wait. The media frenzy outside the courthouse had not abated. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing as they tried to capture every moment of this high-profile case. For days, speculation had run rampant, some predicting Musk's acquittal, others foreseeing a guilty verdict that would forever alter his business empire. The world was watching, waiting to see how this modern-day David versus Goliath story would unfold. Musk had spent his time between the trial's end and the verdict pacing in his hotel room, thinking about everything that had led him here. He thought about Tesla, SpaceX, the Mars mission, the future of humanity, and how it all came down to this one decision. In the silence of his room, the noise of the world outside seemed to disappear. It was just him, his thoughts, and the overwhelming sense that everything he had worked for could be taken away in an instant. As the hours ticked by, the defense team remained hopeful but guarded. Sarah Thompson, his lead attorney, was calm, though the slight tension in her jawline revealed how much this case had taken out of her. She had done her job, but even she couldn't predict how the jury would rule. Meanwhile, the prosecution's team had its own concerns. Despite their carefully crafted case, they were aware that the emotional appeal made by Thompson and the defense team had planted seeds of doubt. Musk's team had succeeded in humanizing him, showing that his vision, no matter how flawed, was driven by something more than mere greed. It was driven by a belief that he could change the world. The prosecution could no longer claim that Musk was just a villain, they had failed to convince the jury of that. At last, the day arrived. The judge summoned the courtroom back to session, the moment everyone had been waiting for. The room was packed with media, family members, and legal teams, all of them holding their breath as they waited for the jury to return. Musk sat at the defendant's table, his hands resting loosely on the table in front of him. He was trying to stay composed, but inside, his heart raced. For all his talk of believing in his vision, of knowing that he had done the right thing, the uncertainty of the moment was overwhelming. This wasn't just about stock prices or legal technicalities, it was about his future. His legacy. The judge's voice broke through the silence. The jury has reached a verdict. Every head in the courtroom turned toward the jury box. There they sat, 12 men and women, their faces unreadable. One of the jurors stood up, holding the piece of paper that would determine Musk's fate. The courtroom grew quieter, if that was even possible. All eyes were now on the foreperson, waiting for the words that would change everything. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Elon Musk, not guilty of all charges." For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then, as if a wave had suddenly crashed over the room, a collective sigh of relief swept through Musk's legal team. Some of them exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and joy. Musk himself sat frozen for just a second, the shock of the words sinking in. He had won. He had been cleared of all charges. The prosecution, meanwhile, looked defeated. The lead prosecutor sat back in his chair, rubbing his forehead in frustration. They had come so close to securing a conviction, but it had all slipped away at the last moment. As the judge formally announced the verdict, Musk stood up, feeling as if the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. His legal team was already surrounding him, shaking his hand, congratulating him. Musk felt a rush of gratitude toward them, toward Sarah Thompson, who had believed in him from the start, and toward the rest of the defense team who had fought tirelessly for him. He looked up to see the faces of his family, his close colleagues from Tesla, SpaceX, and other ventures, all of them watching him with a mixture of pride and relief. His mother, Mae Musk, was smiling with tears in her eyes. His brothers, Kimball and Tosca, stood nearby, sharing a moment of quiet celebration. It wasn't just a victory for Musk, it was a victory for everyone who had supported him, for everyone who had believed in him when things seemed bleakest. As he turned to walk out of the courtroom, Musk's mind was already racing. The verdict was a win, but it was also a new beginning. The legal battle was over, but the real challenge lay ahead. He had to prove to the world, once again, that he could change it. Musk paused at the door, turning back to take one last look at the courtroom. For a brief moment, he let the weight of the trial fall away from him. He had survived. But it was what came next that mattered most. The press would be all over him. They would want interviews, sound bites, and stories. But for now, all he could think about was moving forward, about building the future, as he had always done. He had faced the fire and emerged stronger. It was time to shift focus back to what really mattered. The days following the verdict were a whirlwind. While the courtroom drama had ended, the world's eyes were still on Elon Musk. The media outlets exploded with headlines, commentators and pundits dissected every detail of the trial, and analysts speculated on what Musk's acquittal would mean for Tesla, SpaceX, and his future endeavors. The legal battle was behind him, but the war of public perception was far from over. Musk found himself in an entirely new kind of spotlight. It wasn't the intense scrutiny of the trial, it was the aftermath, the fallout of a court case that had captivated the world's attention. Suddenly, he wasn't just the CEO of Tesla or the founder of SpaceX, he had become a symbol. A symbol of both innovation and controversy, a figure whose every move was now dissected and analyzed. He had spent much of his life pushing boundaries, challenging the status quo, and pursuing his dreams regardless of the obstacles in his path. But now, in the wake of the trial, he was facing something far more intangible, the shifting tides of public opinion. People who had once hailed him as a visionary now questioned his methods. Investors who had seen Musk as an oracle of innovation were left wondering if the price of his ambition was too steep. Tesla's stock saw an immediate surge after the verdict, as many investors breathed a collective sigh of relief. Musk's victory in the courtroom meant that, for now, his vision for the future was secure. The Tesla team quickly returned to their work, with production ramping up on new models and new technologies. But behind the scenes, there was a feeling that the company was on the edge of something greater, something that would elevate Tesla beyond the confines of the automotive industry and into the realm of clean energy, artificial intelligence, and beyond. But could Musk maintain the trust of his investors? Could he weather the storm of criticism that was bound to come his way? In the weeks that followed, Musk found himself busier than ever. Meetings with investors, talks with engineers, and, of course, the constant flow of media requests. He had always been a man of action, but now, more than ever, he was navigating a world that required careful diplomacy. There were phone calls to make, partnerships to negotiate, and, above all, the responsibility of guiding his companies toward their bold future goals. Yet, for all the external pressure, Musk's mind kept returning to one thing: the future. He had always been a man who looked ahead, and even in the wake of the trial, his eyes were firmly set on the horizon. Space exploration, the colonization of Mars, the promise of sustainable energy, these were the pursuits that truly mattered to him. The trial had only served to reaffirm his belief that he had to keep pushing forward, no matter the obstacles in his path. One of the first things Musk did after the trial was to gather the leaders of his companies. At Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink, Musk had assembled teams of passionate individuals who shared his vision for the future. In the face of the legal battles, Musk had made sure to stay focused on the innovation and progress of these projects, even though it had been a struggle to balance his personal life with the demands of his companies. The team meeting at SpaceX was particularly intense. The company was on the verge of launching its most ambitious mission to date, the first crewed mission to Mars. Musk had dreamed of this moment for decades, and now it was finally within reach. But there was a new weight on his shoulders. The trial had shown the world just how volatile his personality could be, how prone he was to moments of recklessness. Would the public continue to trust him? Could they continue to believe that SpaceX's Mars mission was achievable, despite the distractions that had surrounded Musk? As he walked into the SpaceX conference room, Musk felt the eyes of his colleagues on him. It was a look of respect, but also one of concern. They knew the stakes. The Mars mission was critical, not just for the future of SpaceX but for Musk's legacy as well. He stood in front of the whiteboard, where the details of the upcoming mission were mapped out. He could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. This was no longer just about business, this was about pushing humanity to the next frontier. The vision of space colonization was something that had always driven him, something that had kept him awake at night. The trial had momentarily distracted him, but now, it was time to focus again. "We're going to Mars," Musk said, his voice firm, but carrying an undercurrent of emotion. "We've faced worse than this before. This is just another challenge. But this time, we're not just proving something to ourselves, we're proving something to the world." His team nodded, sensing his determination. Musk had always been known for his tenacity, and his words were a rallying cry. They had come a long way, but the mission was far from over. After the meeting, Musk retreated to his office, looking out over the horizon. It was a clear day in Hawthorne, California, and he could see the SpaceX facilities stretching out in the distance. The roads, the launch pads, the factories, it was all part of the machine that he had built. But the bigger picture, the one that kept him up at night, was always about Mars. Colonizing the red planet was no longer a fantasy, it was an inevitability. He just had to make it happen. As he sat at his desk, Musk thought about the trial, about everything he had been through. It had been a long and exhausting process, but it had forced him to confront something he had avoided for years, the vulnerability that came with being a public figure. For a long time, Musk had embraced the role of the outsider, the genius who was too focused on the future to care about the present. But now, in the aftermath of the trial, he knew that his future was tied to the present. He would need to balance his ambition with the responsibility of leading not just his companies but also the trust of the public and his investors. The verdict had cleared his name, but it had also forced him to take stock of who he was and what he stood for. The road ahead would be difficult, full of setbacks, media scrutiny, and the constant pressure to perform. But Musk was nothing if not relentless. He stood up, looking at the model of the Mars colony on his desk. This was his life's work. This was his purpose. And he would do whatever it took to get humanity to Mars. The world had witnessed his courtroom drama, but now it was time to show them what he was really made of. Elon Musk had always thrived on being a disruptor, a maverick who could make headlines with a single tweet or a bold business decision. But now, in the aftermath of his courtroom battle, something was different. The public perception of him had shifted. No longer was he just the eccentric genius behind Tesla and SpaceX. Now, he was the man who had been tried in the court of law, the figure whose actions had been scrutinized under a microscope by millions. The courtroom drama had shown just how polarizing Musk had become. Some saw him as a visionary, a man who was willing to risk it all for the sake of humanity's future. Others, however, viewed him as reckless and unpredictable, a man whose desire to change the world often led to chaos and controversy. For the first time in his career, Musk found himself having to navigate the complexities of public relations in a way he had never done before. He wasn't just managing Tesla's stock price or SpaceX's launches anymore, he was managing the image of Elon Musk himself. And that, he realized, was a far more delicate balance. The media played a huge role in shaping how people saw him. Headlines were constantly cropping up, some praising him for his bold vision, others criticizing his personal behavior and business decisions. Social media, too, was a double-edged sword. Musk had always been an active user of platforms like Twitter, where his unfiltered thoughts could reach millions in an instant. But now, every tweet was being carefully examined, every comment analyzed for hidden meanings or potential controversies. He couldn't help but feel the weight of all this attention. No matter what he did, it seemed that there were always critics waiting to tear him down. In the midst of the growing media circus, Musk began to retreat more into himself, distancing himself from the public eye. He still attended key meetings, made important decisions for his companies, but he became less visible in the public sphere. The first sign of trouble came when a viral tweet sparked a new wave of controversy. Musk had always been known for his off-the-cuff remarks, but this time, his comment about Tesla's stock price sent shockwaves through Wall Street. It was a classic example of Musk's unpredictability, but this time it didn't go unnoticed. Regulators, investors, and analysts quickly turned their attention to the tweet, and within hours, Tesla's stock took a significant dip. The fallout was swift. Investors, who had been shaken by the trial, now questioned Musk's ability to lead without causing further disruption. Some of Tesla's largest stakeholders were calling for a more stable figurehead, someone who wouldn't rock the boat so often. The media pounced on the story, portraying Musk as a man out of control, driven more by ego than by sound business practices. Sarah Thompson, his trusted lawyer and confidant, called him that evening, urging him to address the issue directly. "Elon," she said, "you can't keep doing this. You've just been through a trial, and now the stock market is reacting to every little thing you say. You need to show the world that you can manage your companies without letting your personality get in the way." Musk knew she was right. The thought of giving up his spontaneous, freewheeling approach to communication didn't sit well with him, but the reality was undeniable. People were watching, and every misstep seemed to be magnified. He had become more than just a CEO, he had become the face of an entire movement, a movement that depended on trust. The public perception of him was now a crucial factor in the success or failure of Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures. To make matters worse, the media began to draw comparisons between Musk and other tech moguls like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. These were men who had built their empires through calculated moves and a more restrained public presence. Musk, by contrast, was seen as unpredictable, volatile, even reckless. It wasn't just his business decisions that were under scrutiny anymore, it was his personality, his every action. And in the high-stakes world of business, that could be deadly. In an attempt to regain control of the narrative, Musk did what he had always done best, he got back to work. Tesla's latest model, the Cybertruck, was due for a major unveiling, and Musk threw himself into the project. He knew the world was waiting for the next big thing, and he believed the Cybertruck was just that. It was audacious, bold, and completely in line with his vision of the future. But even the unveiling of the Cybertruck couldn't escape the shadows of his recent legal battle. The event was met with mixed reactions. Some hailed the design as a bold step forward, while others mocked it for its unconventional look and shattered windows. The media pounced on the mishap, and soon the memes flooded social media, overshadowing what was supposed to be a game-changing moment for Tesla. Despite the setbacks, Musk refused to back down. He doubled down on his commitment to revolutionize industries, no matter how the public perceived him. He was determined to prove that he was more than just the eccentric billionaire in the headlines, he was the man who could change the world. But the growing pressure weighed heavily on him. He had built companies that were worth billions, yet the most important thing now seemed to be protecting his reputation. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Musk found himself alone in his office. The weight of everything, his trial, the media scrutiny, the stock market volatility, seemed to have built up, and for the first time in a while, Musk allowed himself to feel it. He had always been a man who kept moving forward, who never allowed himself to dwell on failure. But now, as he sat in the quiet of his office, he couldn't help but wonder if the price of his ambition had become too high. The question gnawed at him, was it worth it? The fame, the fortune, the vision for the future, all of it had come at a cost. The trial had forced him to confront his flaws, his impulsiveness, and his tendency to clash with authority. But it also revealed something deeper, a man who was driven by a mission greater than himself. He couldn't let the noise distract him. He couldn't let the world's perception of him dictate his path. Taking a deep breath, Musk stood up and walked toward the window. The city lights of Los Angeles flickered below him, but his mind was far away, on Mars, on the future, on the road ahead. The world could think whatever it wanted about him. He had a job to do, and that job wasn't finished yet. He turned away from the window and walked back to his desk. The next day, he would continue his work, no matter what the world thought of him. The only thing that mattered was his vision. And nothing, not even public perception, would stop him from reaching it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? It was a rainy afternoon when Elon Musk received the call that would once again change the course of his life. He had just finished a long meeting with SpaceX's engineering team about the next round of Mars mission preparations. As usual, the discussions had been intense, filled with the kind of high-level technical language that could make the average person's head spin. But to Musk, these were the kinds of moments he lived for, the challenges that pushed the boundaries of what humanity could achieve. Yet, in the back of his mind, something had been brewing. The moment his phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number, he immediately felt the weight of anticipation in the air. It was the kind of call that could go either way, a new opportunity, a breakthrough, or something else entirely. He glanced at the screen briefly before answering. "Elon, it's Sarah," came the voice of his lawyer. "I need you to sit down for this." A chill ran through Musk, though he tried not to show it. Sarah Thompson had been his trusted advisor and lawyer for years, and when she said something like that, it was never good news. He quickly moved to the nearest chair in his office, staring out of the window at the gray sky, trying to prepare himself for whatever was coming next. "What's happened?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with a quiet urgency. "It's not what you think. A new lawsuit has just been filed," Sarah said, her voice steady but firm. "And it's coming from a major shareholder in Tesla. They're accusing you of negligence, of using Tesla's funds and resources in ways that didn't benefit the shareholders. They claim the Mars mission has taken priority over the company's profitability." Musk's mind instantly went into overdrive. His initial reaction was one of disbelief, but this was not the first time someone had tried to take him down for his ambitions. He had always operated with the belief that his ventures, his passions, were all interconnected. Tesla's success was tied to SpaceX's success and vice versa. They were both part of his broader vision of revolutionizing human civilization. But to the public and to shareholders, that message was often lost in the chaos. "How serious is it?" he asked, his jaw tightening. "Serious enough. The lawsuit could halt your control over Tesla if it gains traction. The board's already discussing it behind closed doors," Sarah replied. "You'll need to act fast and make it clear to the shareholders that your focus remains on Tesla and not just Mars." Musk was silent for a moment, processing the information. He had always known that the path he was on was risky, but this felt different. This was no longer just about innovation, it was about the survival of his empire, the empire he had fought so hard to build. And this time, the attack wasn't coming from external forces. It was coming from within. Is there anything I can do to avoid this? Musk asked, the weight of the decision settling heavily on his shoulders. There's talk about a public statement or an emergency meeting with the board. We need to convince them that you can balance both companies effectively and that your long-term goals for Tesla haven't changed, Sarah suggested. But you'll need to get in front of this, fast. The conversation ended shortly after that, and Musk found himself staring out the window, his thoughts swirling. How could he prove his commitment to Tesla when the very thing that made the company revolutionary, his desire to change the world, was under attack? Tesla wasn't just a car company to him. It was a part of his dream for a sustainable future. But if his vision for Mars was overshadowing his focus on Tesla, could he still retain the support of his shareholders? As the hours passed, Musk found himself retreating into his private thoughts. His personal life, too, had been pulled into the storm. Relationships with family and friends had strained under the pressure of his all-consuming focus on his businesses. In many ways, he had alienated those closest to him, convinced that his singular purpose was too important to ignore. But now, that very purpose was being questioned. The idea of putting Tesla's future on the line to continue his ambitions for Mars made Musk uneasy. He had never backed down before, but this felt different. For the first time, the reality of what he was trying to accomplish, the monumental scale of his goals, seemed to weigh on him. Could he really juggle both his ambitions, changing the world with Tesla and taking humanity to Mars, without losing everything? The next day, Musk convened an emergency meeting with the Tesla board. The mood in the room was tense, palpable with anticipation. The board members sat around the large oval table, exchanging glances as Musk walked in. His usual confidence was slightly subdued, but the fire in his eyes remained undiminished. He knew what he had to do, he needed to take control of the narrative. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Musk began, his voice firm. I know there's been a lot of concern about where my priorities lie. Some have said that I've been neglecting Tesla in favor of SpaceX and the Mars mission. And to that, I say, nothing could be further from the truth. He paused for a moment, looking each person in the eye. Tesla is the foundation of everything I've worked for. It's not just about cars, it's about creating a sustainable future for the planet. The same future that will eventually make space travel possible. But the two are intertwined. You can't have one without the other. There were murmurs around the room, and Musk could sense the skepticism lingering in the air. He could almost hear the wheels turning in their minds, wondering if they could trust him to keep Tesla at the forefront. I understand the concerns, Musk continued. But I can't apologize for dreaming big. The work we're doing at SpaceX will propel Tesla to new heights. Think about the advancements in battery technology, the innovations in autonomous driving. The things we're learning from the Mars mission are going to fuel Tesla's future in ways we haven't even begun to imagine. His voice grew more impassioned as he spoke. We're at a crossroads. We're on the edge of something bigger than all of us. Tesla's mission is clear, to make sustainable energy accessible to the world. But that mission doesn't end with Earth. It stretches beyond, to the stars. We need to keep pushing. We need to keep building. And we need to do it together. For the first time, Musk saw the tension in the room begin to ease. The board members were listening, really listening, to what he had to say. But the real question remained, could he prove to them that his vision for the future was still aligned with Tesla's success? As the meeting concluded, Musk knew that the road ahead was going to be anything but easy. The lawsuit was still out there, and there would be more battles to fight. But this was a challenge he could not back down from. He had always said that it was the hard problems that were worth solving. And this, he realized, was his hardest one yet. It was a sleepless night for Elon Musk. The digital clock on his bedside table blinked 3:42 a.m. as he tossed and turned, thoughts racing faster than he could process them. The lawsuit had become more than just a legal battle, it was now a reflection of the growing chasm between the world's expectations of him and the reality of his vision. The board meeting had gone better than expected, but the doubt still lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Musk knew that the shareholders weren't fully convinced, not yet, at least. It wasn't just about winning their approval anymore, it was about proving to them that he hadn't lost focus. That he could juggle the vast ambitions of both Tesla and SpaceX without falling apart under the weight of it all. But how could he prove that when everything seemed to be going wrong? The next morning, after barely 2 hours of sleep, Musk walked into the Tesla headquarters with the same intensity he always carried, though the weariness in his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. He greeted his team with a brief nod before making his way to his office. There, Sarah Thompson was waiting for him, her face unreadable. "Elon," she said as soon as he entered, "there's something you need to see." She handed him a tablet, showing an article that had just gone viral. A major financial news outlet had picked up the lawsuit and was painting Musk in a damning light. The headline read, "Tesla CEO Elon Musk under fire, lawsuit threatens control of billion-dollar empire." The article was a lengthy, detailed account of the legal claims, complete with quotes from analysts and a statement from the plaintiff's lawyer. "The pressure is building," Sarah continued. "The media is running with it. The stock is already starting to dip, and if this continues, it could take a real hit." Musk stared at the screen, his mind trying to compute the implications. This wasn't just bad press, it was a full-scale attack on his leadership. If it spiraled out of control, it could take everything down. Tesla, SpaceX, his entire legacy. "Do we have a strategy for responding?" Musk asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "We've been working on a public response," Sarah said. "We could push for a counter-narrative, reiterate the importance of the Mars mission to Tesla's long-term goals, and emphasize your commitment to the company. But it's not going to be easy. Some of the larger shareholders are already whispering about potential changes to the board." Musk clenched his jaw. The thought of losing control of Tesla was something he couldn't even entertain. But the reality was undeniable. He had been so focused on Mars, on SpaceX, that he had neglected the immediate concerns of his own company. Now, it was coming to a head. "I'm not going to let them take Tesla from me," Musk said with determination, his eyes burning with intensity. "I've worked too damn hard to get this far. I'm not backing down." Sarah gave him a knowing look. "I didn't think you would. But you need to be careful. You're not just battling a lawsuit. You're battling your own public image." Musk leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. There was a time when he thrived on chaos. It had driven him to create some of the most innovative companies in the world. But now, the chaos felt different. The stakes were higher. There were more people involved, more lives at risk if things went wrong. "I'll make a statement," Musk said finally, a plan beginning to form in his mind. A direct address to the public. "I'll tell them the truth. I'll show them how everything is connected. How the future of Tesla and SpaceX are tied together. They need to understand that I'm not distracted. I'm focused on both." Sarah nodded. "That could work. But you'll need to act fast." Later that afternoon, Musk sat down in front of the cameras in Tesla's headquarters, preparing to make one of the most important statements of his career. The pressure weighed on him, but he was used to that. What mattered now was how he framed the narrative. "Good afternoon, everyone," Musk began, his voice calm but resolute. "I'm Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla. And I'm here today to address some concerns that have been raised recently regarding my focus and the future of Tesla." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle in before continuing. "Let me be clear, Tesla has always been, and will always be, my top priority. We are on the verge of transforming the automotive industry, leading the way in sustainable energy, and pioneering a new future for humanity. But what many people don't understand is that the work we are doing at SpaceX isn't separate from that mission. In fact, it's critical to it. Musk's words gained strength as he continued. The advancements we are making in space travel, in energy production, in technology, all have a direct impact on the work we do here at Tesla. Our goal has never been just to make cars. It's to change the world. And we are doing that, together. His eyes locked directly into the camera. I know there are those who are questioning my commitment to Tesla, but I can assure you that my vision for the future has never been clearer. The Mars mission, SpaceX, and Tesla, they are all part of a larger plan to ensure the survival and prosperity of humanity. And I will not allow anyone to divert me from that goal. The statement was bold, unflinching, and delivered with the same intensity Musk had used to present his most audacious ideas. He wasn't backing down. This was his chance to regain control of the narrative, to tell the world exactly who he was and what he stood for. As the statement ended, Musk sat back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He knew that the battle wasn't over. The media would continue to spin the story, the lawsuit would drag on, and the pressure would mount. But he also knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to lose. Not this time. Not ever. He glanced at Sarah, who was watching him with a look of approval in her eyes. She had known all along that this was the moment that would define everything. "We'll see how this plays out," Musk said quietly, "but I'm not stopping. Not until we reach Mars, and beyond." The days following Elon Musk's public address were a whirlwind of activity. The media continued to dissect every word he had spoken, analyzing his tone, his body language, and even his choice of words. The stock market reacted with a slight rebound, but not enough to alleviate the tension that still hung over Tesla. Despite his attempts to control the narrative, the whispers of discontent from Tesla's investors were growing louder. The lawsuit continued to hang over his head, and Musk could feel the weight of it on his shoulders. Every move he made was scrutinized, every decision, every tweet. It was the kind of pressure that would break lesser men, but Musk wasn't just any man. Or at least, he didn't want to believe he was. But even the strongest minds have their limits. The relentlessness of the battle, the constant juggling of Tesla's immediate needs and SpaceX's ambitious long-term goals, began to chip away at Musk's resolve. He had built an empire, but he had also sacrificed a great deal to do so. And now, the cracks were starting to show. It was a late evening, and Musk sat alone in his office at SpaceX headquarters, staring at the expansive window in front of him. The lights of Los Angeles twinkled below, but he felt a growing sense of isolation. The once familiar rhythm of his life, fueled by an unshakable belief in the future, was slipping from his grasp. He had always been the person who thrived under pressure. For years, he had tackled each crisis with a relentless focus that made others marvel at his ability to rise above it all. But lately, everything had begun to feel like too much. The legal battles. The media frenzy. The ongoing struggles to maintain control of Tesla. And in the midst of it all, the Mars mission loomed, still as ambitious, as audacious, as ever. Elon had always believed that change could only come through great struggle, that it was the price one paid for being a part of something bigger. But now, the cost was beginning to take its toll on him. His family life, once fractured by his obsession with his work, had deteriorated further. His relationships with friends and colleagues had become strained, even distant. And worst of all, there was an undeniable sense that he had lost something deeper, something he couldn't name, but that gnawed at him every waking moment. As he sat there, lost in thought, his phone buzzed on the desk beside him. He glanced at the screen to see a text from Sarah: "We need to talk. It's urgent." Elon hesitated for a moment before replying, "I'm listening." Within minutes, Sarah entered the room. Her usual confidence was replaced by a visible concern, her brow furrowed in a way Musk hadn't seen before. "Sarah, what is it?" Musk asked, already feeling the dread building in his chest. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "It's getting worse," she said, her voice low. We're being bombarded with new legal claims, additional suits, pressure from shareholders. And now, we've got major media outlets questioning your leadership, your judgment, and your ability to manage both companies effectively. The board is getting restless. Musk's jaw clenched. The weight of the words hung in the air like an unbearable cloud. The relentless attacks on his character, on his ability to handle the responsibilities he had taken on, were starting to erode even his own self-confidence. "I'm not backing down," Musk said, his voice tinged with frustration. "I've always fought for what I believe in. I've always faced challenges head-on." "I know, Elon. But this is different," Sarah said, her eyes locking with his. "You're at a breaking point. This pressure, it's starting to affect the way you're handling things. Your decisions are becoming impulsive. You're alienating those who matter most, your team, your investors, even your family. You're pushing everyone away." Musk stood up, running a hand through his hair, trying to process her words. He had always prided himself on his ability to take the heat, to rise above the chaos. But now, he was starting to wonder if he was truly in control or if he had simply become a puppet of his own ambition. "What do you want me to do, Sarah? Walk away?" His voice was tinged with bitterness. "No," she replied softly. "But you need to take a step back. You're too close to the situation. Maybe it's time to let someone else handle some of the day-to-day management, bring in someone who can help you navigate the politics, the pressure. Someone who can be your eyes and ears on the ground while you focus on the bigger picture." Musk stared at her, a mix of anger and confusion swirling in his chest. He had always been the one to make the decisions, to be the driving force behind his companies. The thought of relinquishing control to anyone, especially now, was unimaginable. "I can't do that. I can't just hand over the reins," Musk said, shaking his head. "Tesla is my vision. SpaceX is my vision. I'm not going to let someone else take that from me." "I'm not suggesting that you abandon your vision, Elon," Sarah countered. "But you're burning out. You're reaching a point where your decisions are becoming reactive instead of strategic. You need to stop. Take a break. Recharge. Otherwise, you risk losing everything." Musk was silent for a long moment, grappling with her words. The truth of it stung. He knew that he had been pushing himself and everyone around him to the limit. But could he really step back? Could he take a break when everything he had worked for was on the line? "I don't have time for a break," Musk finally said, his voice almost a whisper. "The future of humanity is on the line." "That's exactly why you need to take a step back," Sarah replied, her tone gentle but firm. "The future of humanity isn't just about Mars. It's about the people here, on Earth. The people who believe in you. The people who are fighting for Tesla, for SpaceX, and for you. They need you to be whole, Elon. Not fractured." Musk felt a knot form in his stomach as he realized the truth of her words. He had been so consumed by his mission, by the weight of the challenges ahead, that he had forgotten about the very people who had supported him through it all. And now, it seemed that he was on the verge of losing them, not just his companies, but the people he had fought so hard to build relationships with. For the first time in a long while, Musk felt an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. He had always believed that the future was his to shape, that his drive and ambition would carry him forward. But now, that drive seemed like a double-edged sword, cutting into everything he had built. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," Musk muttered, his voice barely audible. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. "You don't have to do it alone, Elon. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's okay to ask for help." Musk nodded, though a sense of uncertainty lingered. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was becoming clear: he needed to make a choice. He could either continue down this destructive path or take a step back and find a way to restore balance. The future depended on it. For days, Elon Musk grappled with the weight of Sarah's words. The pressure was suffocating, but he couldn't ignore the growing realization that perhaps, just perhaps, he had pushed himself and those around him too far. Tesla's progress, SpaceX's ambitions, and his own personal vision had all become entangled in a web of relentless demands and constant tension. The truth was inescapable: something had to change. But the idea of taking a break, of stepping away from the constant grind that had defined his entire existence, felt like betrayal. He had built these companies from the ground up. He had poured every ounce of his energy into making them a reality. To let go, even temporarily, was something he couldn't easily accept. Yet, in the quiet moments when he allowed himself to reflect, Musk found himself questioning whether he could continue at this pace. His decision-making had become increasingly erratic, impulsive even. There were days when he was unable to see past the immediate challenges, the constant fire drills that threatened to consume him. And while he had always thrived in the face of adversity, he now realized that even his unrelenting ambition had limits. It was during one of these rare moments of self-reflection that Musk decided it was time to take action. He needed to reevaluate his approach, not just for himself, but for Tesla, SpaceX, and everyone who had invested in his vision. The following week, Musk gathered the senior leadership teams from both Tesla and SpaceX at the company's main conference room. It was an unusual step for him, as he rarely allowed such large meetings to go beyond the most necessary conversations. But this time, he needed to be surrounded by the people who had been with him from the very beginning, those who had believed in his dreams and worked tirelessly to bring them to life. As the executives filed in and took their seats, the weight of the moment settled on Musk's shoulders. He had always been the one to set the course, to lead with unwavering confidence. But now, there was a vulnerability in him that he couldn't shake. It was as if the foundation of everything he had built was being tested, and the stakes had never been higher. He stood up slowly, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. There was an odd calmness in his demeanor now, a stark contrast to the usual fire that fueled his speeches. "Elon, what's going on?" someone from the Tesla team asked, their voice tentative but curious. Musk took a deep breath, his mind racing through 1,000 thoughts. But what mattered now was the truth, both for him and for the people who had supported him along the way. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, his voice steady but tinged with an unusual level of honesty. "About everything, the lawsuit, the media, the pressure on both Tesla and SpaceX. And I've realized something important. For a long time, I've been trying to do it all by myself. I've been carrying the weight of these companies on my shoulders as though I'm the only one who can make the right decisions. And that's simply not true." The room was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. Musk continued, his words coming more freely now, as if a burden had been lifted. "I've pushed everyone, my team, my family, myself, too hard. I've been obsessed with moving forward, with conquering every obstacle, and I've forgotten something fundamental: I'm not alone in this. I've surrounded myself with the best and brightest people, and it's time I started trusting you all more. It's time to let go of some of the control." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. This wasn't the Elon Musk they were used to. He was the visionary, the mastermind, the one who set the direction. To hear him speak of trusting others, of letting go, was unexpected. "I'm not saying I'm stepping away completely," Musk continued, "but I need to delegate more. I need to focus on what I'm best at, creating the vision, pushing the boundaries. But I can't do that if I'm bogged down in every small decision. It's time to get back to the big picture." There was a pause before one of the SpaceX engineers spoke up. "Elon, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we're with you, no matter what. We all believe in your vision. We've always believed in it. If this means you taking a step back to recharge, then we'll support you." Another voice chimed in from the Tesla side. "We've followed you because you've shown us what's possible. We trust your judgment. But it's okay to share the load. You don't have to carry it all alone." Musk nodded, grateful for their understanding, but also humbled by the realization that he had been isolating himself far too long. He had built a team, a family within both companies, but he hadn't fully embraced the power of that support. It was time for change, not just for him, but for all of them. "I'll be relying on all of you more moving forward," Musk said, his voice resolute. "But I need you to understand something, the mission hasn't changed. Tesla and SpaceX are still the two most important things in my life. We are still going to Mars, and we're still revolutionizing the automotive industry. But I can't do it alone anymore." The room filled with a sense of relief, as though a weight had been lifted. For the first time in a long while, Musk could see the possibility of a future where he didn't have to shoulder every burden. He wasn't the only one who could carry the torch. As the meeting adjourned, Musk felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in months: hope. It wasn't just the hope that his companies would succeed, it was the hope that he could rediscover the balance he had lost. A balance between ambition and reality, between vision and self-care. And with that realization came a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would still be filled with challenges, with lawsuits, and with critics. But Musk now knew that he didn't have to face it all alone. He had his team. And more importantly, he had his own ability to trust them. He wasn't just the leader of Tesla and SpaceX anymore. He was part of something bigger, a collective force that would push humanity to new frontiers. Together, they would go further than any one person could ever go on their own. In the weeks that followed, Musk began to implement the changes he had discussed with his leadership teams. He didn't abandon his responsibilities, but he allowed others to take on more, delegating the day-to-day tasks that had once consumed him. He spent more time thinking about the broader vision for Tesla and SpaceX, focusing on the areas where his passion and expertise could have the most impact. At first, the transition was difficult. Old habits die hard, and Musk was used to being at the center of every decision, every breakthrough, and every crisis. But as he started to lean on others, he found that the weight of the world didn't rest entirely on his shoulders anymore. He began to see how much his team had grown, how much they had learned from him, and from each other. The results were almost immediate. At Tesla, the new management structure allowed for quicker decision-making, and the focus on innovation returned to the forefront. New designs for more affordable electric vehicles were being finalized, and a new production strategy was rolling out that could potentially revolutionize the industry. SpaceX, too, saw a boost in morale. The engineers were working tirelessly on the next generation of rockets, and the Mars mission, which had once seemed a distant dream, was becoming a tangible goal that everyone could rally around. But perhaps the most noticeable change in the aftermath of Musk's decision to step back was his own sense of peace. For the first time in years, he wasn't feeling the constant pull of stress and burnout. There were still challenges, of course, no company this ambitious could avoid them, but they no longer felt insurmountable. And the lawsuits, the public scrutiny? They were still there, but they no longer dominated his life. The balance he had been searching for had slowly begun to settle into place. It was a rainy afternoon in late September when Musk received a call that would test the new stability he had fought so hard to create. The phone rang as he was working in his office, surrounded by blueprints for the next SpaceX mission. His heart skipped a beat when he saw the name on the screen, Sarah. "Hey, Sarah," Musk answered, his voice casual but alert. "Elon," she said, her tone serious. "I think we need to talk. There's something we've just discovered, and it's big." Musk's stomach dropped. There was no mistaking the urgency in Sarah's voice. "What's going on?" "It's about the lawsuit," Sarah began. "There's a new development, and it's not what we expected. I'm not sure how to say this, but it looks like the prosecution might have uncovered some new evidence that could really complicate things for you." Musk's mind immediately began racing, the anxiety he had worked so hard to shed beginning to resurface. "What kind of evidence? What are they claiming?" "They're claiming that some of your communications with the board during the time of the funding tweet were more problematic than we thought," Sarah explained. "They might argue that you misled them, that your statements about funding were not just inaccurate, but intentionally misleading. This could bring a whole new level of scrutiny. It might even put you in direct legal jeopardy." Musk ran a hand through his hair, staring at the documents scattered across his desk. This was the kind of challenge he had feared, the kind of setback that could undo all the progress he had made. "I'll deal with it," he said firmly, though his heart was pounding in his chest. "Tell me everything. We'll need to prepare." But Sarah hesitated. "Elon, I know you've been handling things differently, and I admire that. But this might be the kind of thing that could drag on for months, if not years. The stakes are higher now, and I'm worried about how it might affect you, personally and professionally. It's the kind of pressure you were under before." Musk closed his eyes for a moment. The memories of the days when the pressure had become unbearable were still fresh in his mind. He had come so far, but now, he was facing the very thing that had nearly broken him before. "I'm not going to let it destroy me, Sarah," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not going back to where I was." She sighed, a mixture of relief and concern in her voice. "Good. But you need to stay focused. We need to handle this with a clear head. We've made progress, but it's all at risk if we don't approach this carefully." Musk nodded, despite the fact that Sarah couldn't see him. "I get it. Let's talk strategy. What's our next move?" Over the next few days, Musk, Sarah, and the rest of the legal team worked tirelessly to prepare for the impending legal storm. Musk spent hours revisiting the details of his communications during the infamous tweet. He reviewed transcripts, emails, and legal documents, determined to find any evidence that could help his case. But something inside him had shifted. Instead of reacting to every challenge with frustration and anxiety, he approached this new hurdle with a calm determination. He delegated the legal aspects of the case to his trusted advisors while he focused on the larger mission. It wasn't easy, he still felt the weight of the lawsuit pressing against him, but he understood now that his role was not to do everything himself, but to lead with a sense of vision, integrity, and resolve. He also took the time to re-engage with his family. His relationship with his children, strained by years of intense focus on work, had begun to heal. He found moments to be present with them, to enjoy the simple joys of life outside the boardroom and the launch pad. This, too, was part of the balance he had been striving for. The coming months would still be difficult. The lawsuit was far from resolved, and the public scrutiny would only intensify. But Musk now knew that he didn't have to face these challenges alone. He had his team, his family, and his own sense of clarity to guide him through. The road to recovery wasn't an easy one, but he was on it, one step at a time. The weeks that followed the revelation about the new evidence in the lawsuit were a blur of press conferences, legal meetings, and internal strategy sessions. Elon Musk had always been a master of managing chaos, but this was different. The pressure was more intense, the stakes higher, and the constant media scrutiny felt like a magnifying glass on his every move. It wasn't just about Tesla and SpaceX anymore, the case had taken on a personal dimension. Musk had never been one to shy away from controversy, but the possibility of legal consequences, of losing everything he had built, was a reality that weighed heavily on him. The constant worry gnawed at him in the quiet moments, those rare moments when he wasn't surrounded by his team or in the midst of yet another urgent call. But through it all, one thing had become clear: this was his crucible. A test of everything he had worked for, of everything he had become. The fire was relentless, but it would either forge him into something stronger, or it would break him. Sarah and the legal team worked tirelessly to mount a defense. They pored over every document, every email, every piece of communication from the period surrounding the infamous tweet about taking Tesla private. Musk spent hours with his legal advisors, ensuring every angle was covered. The new evidence the prosecution claimed to have was ambiguous at best, but their strategy was clear: they would paint Musk as a reckless billionaire who thought he could bend the rules to suit his whims. Musk, however, wasn't one to simply sit back and hope for the best. He was determined to fight back with the same intensity that had propelled him to success in the first place. He knew that this battle wasn't just about defending himself, it was about protecting the future of Tesla and SpaceX. The companies he had built were too important to be undermined by a lawsuit, no matter how high-profile it was. But the more he worked, the more exhausted he became. He found himself back in the grind, staying up late into the night, reviewing documents, and preparing for the court appearances. His old habits were creeping back in, and it wasn't long before Sarah noticed. "Elon," she said one morning, as they were reviewing strategy documents for the umpteenth time, "you need to take a step back. You're pushing yourself too hard again. You can't keep running like this." He didn't respond immediately, his mind still whirling with legal strategies and potential outcomes. Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts again, firmer this time. "Elon, listen to me," she said. "You're not doing anyone any good if you burn yourself out again. We're in a better place than we were before. You've made significant changes to how you're running things, but if you go back to the way you were working before, none of that will matter." Musk finally met her gaze, seeing the concern in her eyes. He had been so focused on the case, on the immediate challenges, that he had lost sight of the bigger picture, the reason he had started making changes in the first place. He had promised himself he wouldn't fall back into old patterns. Yet here he was, caught in the same cycle again. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm getting lost in it. But if I don't give it everything I've got, then what happens to Tesla, to SpaceX? We're so close to the breakthrough. I can't let anything derail that." Sarah paused, her gaze softening. "You've already given everything, Elon. And now you need to trust the people around you. The team, the legal advisors, your family, we're all here. But you can't keep going at this pace. If you do, you risk losing everything, including your own health." He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the truth in her words. He had spent so long being the center of it all, doing everything himself, that he hadn't realized just how much he was sacrificing. It wasn't just about the companies anymore, it was about his well-being, too. "I'll slow down," he said, his voice low. "But I can't let this case win. Not after everything we've worked for." Sarah nodded. "And you won't. We've got a solid defense. We've got your back. But we all need you at your best. That's how we win this." The next few days were a blur of meetings and calls, but Musk made a conscious decision to start stepping back, even just a little. He delegated more, taking a step back from the finer details of the legal proceedings and trusting his team to take the lead. He spent more time with his family, reconnecting with his children and trying to balance the chaos with some semblance of normalcy. He went back to the gym, made time for quiet walks, and even began reading books that weren't about rockets or electric cars. There were moments when he struggled with the urge to dive back into the work. He had always been a man who thrived on intensity, but now he was learning to find peace in the pauses. He still checked in on Tesla's progress, still attended meetings with SpaceX, but he was no longer suffocating under the weight of it all. Then, one afternoon, as he was walking through the Tesla factory in Fremont, he received a call from Sarah. His heart skipped a beat as he picked up the phone. "Elon," she said, "we've got good news. The prosecution's case has started to fall apart. The evidence they thought they had wasn't as strong as they initially claimed. There's a very real chance we could see this case dismissed sooner than expected." For the first time in what felt like ages, Musk allowed himself a deep breath. The pressure had been unbearable, but now, for the first time in months, he could see a light at the end of the tunnel. "It's not over yet," he said, trying to keep his excitement in check. "But this is good news. Very good news." Sarah laughed softly. "Yes, it is. But don't get too comfortable just yet. We still have work to do." Musk smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. The crucible was far from over, but he could see the shape of victory taking form. And this time, he wasn't alone. He had his team, his family, and himself, a new version of himself, one that understood the power of trust, delegation, and balance. In the end, this fight wasn't just about the companies. It was about survival, growth, and the ability to find meaning in the struggle. Musk wasn't just rebuilding Tesla and SpaceX, he was rebuilding himself. And that, he realized, was the most important journey of all. It had been months since the legal storm had begun, but the end was finally in sight. Musk had managed to keep his composure, weathering the intense media coverage, the mounting pressure from investors, and the emotional toll of defending his companies and his reputation. The constant scrutiny had been grueling, but he had learned to navigate it with a level of calm that he hadn't thought possible. Yet as the trial date approached, the tension started to build once more. The legal team was confident, but the battle was far from over. Musk couldn't help but feel the familiar gnawing sensation in the pit of his stomach. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything he had worked for. Despite the challenges of the case, Musk's focus never wavered from his companies. Tesla had launched several new innovations in electric vehicle technology, and SpaceX had successfully launched a series of satellites that were revolutionizing the way people accessed the internet. The stakes were higher than ever. Not just for him, but for the future of sustainable energy and space exploration. Yet as the courtroom date loomed closer, Musk knew there would be one final test. The case had gone through various stages, but now the prosecution was pulling out all the stops. They had dug deep into his past, scrutinizing every business decision, every tweet, every public statement. As the days grew shorter, the world seemed to shrink. Every glance at his phone, every moment spent reading the news brought more bad headlines. The court of public opinion had already judged him. To some, he was a visionary genius. To others, a reckless billionaire who thought he could bend the rules. Either way, the stakes were high. But for Musk, it wasn't just about the media or the courtroom. It was about proving to himself that he could endure this crucible and come out stronger on the other side. That evening, as Musk sat in his office in SpaceX headquarters, he reviewed his strategy once more. He had heard the predictions. The analysts said the case was going to be tough. The pundits predicted he might walk away with a fine, or worse, face a public reprimand that would affect the companies he had spent decades building. He had already endured the worst of the humiliation, but the final verdict, what would that mean for him? A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Sarah stepped inside, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a rare hint of uncertainty. "Elon," she began, "there's something I think you should know." Musk looked up, his brow furrowed. Sarah rarely came to him with bad news. "What is it?" "I've just seen the latest report. The prosecution's witnesses, some of them are starting to have second thoughts," she said, pacing slightly. "There's a chance the case could collapse. We've got more leverage than we thought." Musk leaned forward in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "You're telling me that we might actually win this?" Sarah nodded, but there was still caution in her tone. "It's not a sure thing. There's still a long way to go. But we're in a much stronger position now. If we can keep the pressure up, there's a real chance this could go our way." Musk let out a slow breath. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel a spark of hope. "How long until the trial?" 2 days, Sarah replied. "We have one final chance to make our case, and the clock is ticking." Musk stood up, his mind racing with the implications. It had all led to this moment. The courtroom would be the final battleground where everything he had built, everything he had sacrificed, would be decided. He had been in tough situations before, several, in fact. But this one felt different. It wasn't just about winning, it was about proving the power of resilience. "I've got to prepare. Let's make sure we've covered everything." "Every angle," Musk said, his voice firm. Sarah nodded. "I'm on it. I'll get the team ready. But Elon, don't forget to take care of yourself. The pressure's immense, and we don't want you burning out now." "I'm fine," Musk replied, a sharp edge to his voice. But he appreciated the concern. Deep down, he knew it was a tough balancing act. The pressure to perform, the need to be sharp, and yet, his own well-being had to be part of the equation. It wasn't just about surviving the lawsuit, it was about setting a new course for himself, even in the midst of chaos. The next few days were a whirlwind of strategy sessions, late-night preparations, and intense discussions with his legal team. They reviewed every argument, every possible piece of evidence. Musk knew that this would be the most critical moment of his life. The final test. The courtroom was set for the following morning. Musk, dressed in his usual understated style, a black suit with a white shirt, stood before his team. He felt the weight of their expectations, but also the importance of what they were about to undertake. As the trial began, Musk sat quietly in the courtroom, his eyes trained on the prosecution as they began to present their case. They tried to paint him as a man who couldn't be trusted, someone who had misled the public and the board, someone who had disregarded the rules for the sake of his ego. Musk sat still, his expression calm but unreadable. The moment of truth had arrived. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up slowly, walking confidently toward the witness stand. He knew this was the defining moment, the final chance to make his case. He was no longer the same person who had tweeted in haste all those years ago. He had grown, learned, and evolved. He was no longer just a businessman, he was a leader who had learned the value of humility, of taking responsibility for his actions. "I'm here today not to defend myself, but to defend the companies I've worked so hard to build," Musk began, his voice steady. "Tesla and SpaceX aren't just companies to me. They're a vision for the future. A future that relies on innovation, integrity, and the pursuit of something greater than just profits." He paused, making eye contact with the jury, his words deliberate and measured. "I've made mistakes, yes. But every decision I've made, every risk I've taken, has been in service of that vision. I'm not perfect, but I'm committed to doing better, to building a future that's sustainable and inspiring." The room was silent, all eyes on him. Musk had said what he needed to say. He had laid out the truth, not just in defense of his actions, but in defense of everything he had built. Now, all he could do was wait. The next few hours were a blur. The defense rested, and the jury deliberated. Musk sat with his team, his mind racing with possibilities. Would this be the end of the road? Or would they be able to salvage the future they had worked so hard to create? At last, after what felt like an eternity, the verdict was announced. The courtroom was filled with tension as the judge read the decision. The court finds in favor of the defense. The charges against Mr. Elon Musk are hereby dismissed. A wave of relief washed over Musk. His body, which had been coiled in anticipation, relaxed for the first time in months. The battle was over. And he had won. The courtroom erupted into quiet chatter, but Elon Musk remained still, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. The judge's words still hung in the air, almost too good to believe. "The charges against Mr. Elon Musk are hereby dismissed." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The years of legal battles, the pressure of being scrutinized in every headline, and the constant anxiety of the unknown had all led to this moment. Musk felt a rush of relief, though it was tempered by a quiet realization. The fight hadn't been just about clearing his name, it had been about redefining who he was as a person, and what he wanted his legacy to be. As the jury filed out of the courtroom, Sarah approached him, her face lighting up with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "We did it," she said, her voice full of relief. Musk nodded slowly. "Yes, we did. But, it's not just about this case. It's about everything else that comes after." Sarah paused, sensing the deeper undercurrent in his words. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Musk began, his voice softening, "this battle was just a symptom of something larger. A wake-up call. The things I've been fighting for, Tesla, SpaceX, those are important. But I can't keep pushing myself to the limit like I have been. I need to focus on what matters most." It was a rare moment of vulnerability for Musk, one that Sarah hadn't seen often. In his world of relentless ambition, this new perspective felt like a revelation. There was more to life than work. There was more to life than the unyielding pursuit of success. "Maybe it's time to take a step back and look at the bigger picture," Musk said, the weight of his words sinking in. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings and press conferences, but this time, something was different. Musk's energy wasn't spent solely on the lawsuits, the headlines, or the lawsuits. He began thinking about the future in a new way, taking stock of what really mattered, not just to him, but to those who had supported him all these years. He spent more time with his children, taking them to the SpaceX facility and showing them the rockets that would one day carry humanity to Mars. He knew that, if he had any hope of leaving behind a lasting legacy, it wouldn't be through fighting in courtrooms or battling competitors. It would be by inspiring the next generation to dream big, to think beyond what was possible, and to dare to make it happen. One afternoon, as he sat in his office at SpaceX headquarters, he found himself lost in thought, staring at a blueprint for a new rocket design. The future of space exploration was still wide open, and he felt that he was only beginning to tap into its potential. Yet, for the first time in years, he wasn't overwhelmed by the work. He wasn't driven by a need to prove something to the world. Instead, he was driven by a sense of purpose, an understanding that the journey ahead would be about more than just the destination. "Hey, Elon," a voice broke through his reverie. He looked up to see his longtime engineer, Mark, standing at the door. Mark had been with SpaceX from the very beginning, and like many of the people in Musk's life, he had seen the highs and lows. "Mark," Musk said with a nod, "what's on your mind?" "We've been talking," Mark said, stepping into the office. "The team's been discussing some new initiatives, and we think it's time to really push the envelope. We want to accelerate the Mars program, but not just with rockets. What if we start thinking about building infrastructure on Mars itself?" Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of infrastructure?" "Like habitat modules, renewable energy setups, water extraction systems," Mark said. "The idea is to build a self-sustaining colony, something that could support human life beyond just sending astronauts there." For the first time in a long time, Musk's eyes lit up with the excitement of new possibilities. "You're talking about not just visiting Mars, but living there." "A colony." "Exactly," Mark replied. "It's ambitious, but then again, so is everything we do. If we're serious about getting humanity to Mars, we can't just keep launching rockets. We need to think about what comes next." Musk leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the desk. This wasn't just another technical challenge. This was the next frontier, and it felt like the perfect project to pour his renewed energy into. The future of human civilization depended on it. "You're right," Musk said slowly. "We're thinking too small if we're only talking about rockets. Let's start building. Let's make Mars our next home." Mark smiled. "That's the spirit." As Musk took on this new challenge, he also found himself recalibrating his role within Tesla. The company had continued to grow at an impressive rate, and despite the legal battles, it remained a leader in the electric vehicle market. However, Musk knew he couldn't keep running both Tesla and SpaceX at the pace he had been. "I think it's time for someone else to take the helm at Tesla," Musk said one evening to his close advisor, Brad, a longtime friend who had witnessed Musk's roller coaster journey firsthand. Brad looked at him in surprise. "Are you sure? Tesla's your baby." "I know," Musk replied, "but I've learned a lot over the years. I need to focus on the bigger picture now. Mars, the future of humanity. I need to take a step back and let the team handle Tesla." It wasn't an easy decision for Musk, but it was one that felt right. Tesla was in capable hands, and he knew that the company's success wouldn't hinge on him alone. The future of the company, just like the future of SpaceX, depended on the collective strength of the teams he had built. It was time to trust them fully. And so, in a stunning move, Musk announced that he would step down from his day-to-day role at Tesla, shifting his focus primarily to SpaceX and the development of the Mars program. It was a bold move, one that took many by surprise, but Musk was resolute. As the months passed, Musk's new vision for humanity began to take shape. SpaceX launched a series of successful missions, and work on Mars infrastructure was underway. Musk spent his days immersed in the future, planning how to make life on Mars not just a dream, but a reality. He also continued to spend time with his family, finding balance in a way he never had before. It wasn't easy, but it was fulfilling. The work didn't stop, it never could for someone like Elon Musk, but now there was a sense of purpose that went beyond the pressures of business. There was a mission to accomplish, one that would shape the future of the entire human race. One evening, as he stood in front of a model of the Mars colony, he smiled. It was a future he had once only dreamed of, and now, it was within reach. "Let's make history," he whispered to himself. It was a new beginning, a new chapter not just for Musk, but for humanity itself. The morning air at SpaceX headquarters was crisp, as Elon Musk stood on the rooftop, staring out over the bustling complex. Below, the teams were already hard at work, designing rockets, testing engines, and pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible in space travel. But today, the focus was different. Today was the official launch of Musk's new vision for the future, the Mars Initiative. The concept was audacious, even by Musk's standards. Colonizing Mars wasn't just about sending astronauts there, it was about creating a sustainable, self-sufficient colony capable of thriving in the harsh environment of the Red Planet. And to Musk, it wasn't a far-off dream, it was an urgent necessity. Humanity's survival depended on becoming a multiplanetary species. Earth wasn't guaranteed to be around forever, and Mars offered an opportunity to start fresh, to build a new world, from the ground up. But Musk wasn't naive. He knew the enormity of the task ahead. Colonizing Mars wasn't just about rockets. It was about food, water, shelter, and energy. It was about developing the technology to make human life not just survivable, but sustainable. And for that, SpaceX would need the best minds in the world, engineers, scientists, biologists, and architects, all working together to tackle the unthinkable. Today marks the beginning of a new era, Musk announced during a press conference that was streamed live to millions of people around the world. His voice was steady, but the intensity of his conviction was clear. Mars isn't just a destination. It's the future of humanity. And we're going to build it. The world watched as Musk unveiled the first phase of the Mars Initiative, the construction of the Mars Habitat Module, designed to house the first colonists on Mars. It wasn't just a space station, it was a self-sustaining environment, capable of supporting human life for extended periods. The module would be equipped with everything necessary for survival: oxygen generators, water recycling systems, solar panels for energy, and hydroponic farms to grow food. The idea was to create a prototype that could be tested on Earth before being transported to Mars. But even as Musk spoke with unwavering certainty, he knew the road ahead would be far from smooth. The technological hurdles alone were monumental. SpaceX's Starship rocket would need to be refined and tested to ensure that it could carry the massive payloads necessary to establish the colony. The Mars Habitat modules would need to be able to withstand the extreme conditions of the Martian atmosphere, with its bone-chilling cold and constant dust storms. And there was the risk factor: sending humans to Mars would be dangerous. Many had questioned the ethics of risking human lives for a mission that might fail. But Musk, ever the optimist, was undeterred. He had always believed that failure wasn't the end, it was part of the journey. Each mistake, each setback, was simply a lesson to be learned. It was the only way forward. After the press conference, Musk gathered his core team in a large conference room at SpaceX. They had been working on Mars-related projects for months, but now, with the official announcement, the pressure was on. The eyes of the world were upon them. Failure was not an option. "We're going to Mars. This is no longer a dream," Musk began, his eyes scanning the room. "This is a reality. And we're going to make it happen." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "We need everyone to bring their best ideas. We need to solve problems that have never been solved before. But we also need to work fast. Every day matters. Every moment counts." There was a palpable sense of excitement in the room, but also an undercurrent of anxiety. Musk could see it on the faces of his team members. The challenge ahead was unprecedented, and they all knew it. But Musk was a master at inspiring his people, even in the face of uncertainty. His belief in them was contagious. "I know this won't be easy," Musk continued. "It's going to take years of hard work, setbacks, and sacrifices. But we're not doing this for us. We're doing this for humanity. We're doing this for our children, and their children, and their children after them." A quiet hum of agreement rippled through the room. "This is the most important thing we will ever do," Musk concluded. "Now, let's get to work." Over the following months, SpaceX began to accelerate its efforts. The Mars Habitat Module, still in its conceptual phase, began to take shape. The engineers worked tirelessly to refine the design, incorporating the latest advances in materials science and technology. Every detail was scrutinized: how to create airtight seals, how to recycle waste, how to produce food on a barren planet with no soil. Meanwhile, the Starship rocket program also gained momentum. Tests were being conducted regularly, with the aim of perfecting the spacecraft's ability to carry humans and cargo to Mars. It wasn't just about the rocket's ability to get to Mars, it was about ensuring that it could carry enough supplies to sustain a colony long-term. Musk knew that the key to making Mars a viable habitat was self-sufficiency. The colony couldn't rely on Earth for anything. It had to be autonomous. To accomplish this, SpaceX was working on developing systems for water extraction from the Martian atmosphere, creating solar power grids that could withstand the harsh Martian environment, and developing new technologies for energy storage. They were also looking at advanced robotics to assist with construction and exploration once the first crew arrived. As the work progressed, Musk found himself spending more time in the lab, working alongside the engineers and scientists. He was fully immersed in the project, pushing the team to think beyond what was thought possible. There was a sense of urgency that he hadn't felt in years. This was it. This was the challenge that would define his legacy, not just in the business world, but for humanity as a whole. But the deeper Musk got into the project, the more he realized how daunting the task truly was. Every new discovery brought with it new challenges. But Musk was used to challenges. After all, it was what had driven him to build Tesla, SpaceX, and everything else. It was the pursuit of the impossible that fueled him. One evening, after another grueling day of meetings and presentations, Musk sat alone in his office, staring at a digital rendering of the Mars Habitat Module. His mind wandered, as it often did, to the bigger picture. What would life on Mars look like? What kind of society would emerge? He imagined a thriving community of humans, living and working on a planet that was once thought uninhabitable. There would be challenges, of course, conflicts, hardships, and the constant struggle to survive. But Musk believed that humanity was capable of more than anyone realized. He leaned back in his chair, a rare moment of reflection. He had always been a man of action, driven by the need to make things happen. But now, as he gazed at the vision before him, he understood that it wasn't just about reaching Mars, it was about building something that would outlast all of them. Something that would ensure that humanity had a future, no matter what happened on Earth. A future on Mars. The countdown clock on the wall ticked down to the final moments. The tension in the air at SpaceX headquarters was almost tangible, a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Elon Musk stood at the center of the room, surrounded by his engineers and scientists. It was a moment they had all been working toward for years, and now, as the first mission to Mars was about to launch, the weight of their collective efforts was more real than ever. The goal of this mission wasn't just about getting to Mars. It was about proving that the Mars initiative was more than just a vision, it was a reality. The Starship rocket, packed with supplies, technology for the Mars Habitat modules, and advanced scientific equipment, was about to make history. If everything went according to plan, this would be the first step in establishing a human presence on Mars. And Musk, ever the perfectionist, knew that every detail mattered. "Is everything in place?" Musk asked, his voice steady but filled with the underlying tension that had been building for days. "Everything's set, Elon," said Sarah, his trusted operations lead. Her eyes were fixed on the monitors, tracking the data as it streamed in. "The rocket is primed, all systems are go." Musk nodded, though his mind was racing. This mission had been in the works for years, and now that the moment was here, the pressure to succeed was higher than ever. There was no room for error. Space exploration was fraught with dangers, and while this wasn't a crude mission, it was still a massive step toward their ultimate goal. Failure could mean a huge setback for the entire Mars initiative. The clock continued to tick down, the final seconds creeping by. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A roar filled the air as the Starship rocket's engines ignited, lifting off from the launch pad. The force of the blast sent a tremor through the ground, but Musk didn't flinch. He watched intently, his eyes locked on the live feed as the rocket soared into the sky, piercing the clouds and disappearing into the vast expanse of space. As the rocket disappeared from sight, Musk allowed himself a brief moment of relief. The mission had begun. The first tangible step toward Mars had been taken. The first phase of the Mars initiative was officially underway. The room erupted into cheers, but Musk remained composed. He had been here before: launches, tests, milestones. The euphoria of a successful launch was familiar, but the work wasn't done. It never was. There would be countless more missions, more tests, and more challenges before the first human beings would set foot on Mars. But this was a victory. It was a sign that they were on the right path. "I'll believe it when I see it in orbit," Musk said with a slight grin, though the pride in his eyes was evident. He wasn't being dismissive, he was just focused. Focused on what was next. The team, however, was jubilant. They had been working toward this moment for years, and now, it was finally happening. The cheers continued as Musk watched the rocket's trajectory on the screen. It wasn't just the rocket that was important, it was the promise it represented. It was the first link in a chain that would eventually lead to human settlements on Mars. As the rocket continued its journey into space, Musk took a deep breath, his mind already racing ahead to the next stage. There would be more tests, more refinement, but the goal was clear: to make Mars accessible, to make it home. The excitement of the successful launch soon gave way to the reality of what came next. While the rocket was on its way to Mars, Musk knew that there were countless challenges ahead. The Mars habitat modules still needed to be built, and the technology to extract water from the Martian atmosphere was still in its infancy. The life support systems had to be tested, and there was the issue of how to protect the colony from radiation, a constant threat on the Red Planet. He sat in his office later that day, looking at blueprints and plans scattered across the desk. SpaceX had achieved the impossible before, but this was different. This wasn't just about rockets and tech. This was about the survival of humanity. And Musk couldn't afford to think small anymore. "This is bigger than anything we've ever done," Musk muttered to himself. The words echoed in the quiet room. He had always been driven by the next big thing, the next challenge, but now, he realized just how much was at stake. The future of humanity, his legacy, it all hinged on the success of the Mars initiative. He called Sarah into his office, his mind already racing with ideas. "We need to double down on the research," he said. "The habitat modules, the water extraction systems, the food production, we need to get these technologies to Mars as soon as possible. I don't care about the timeline anymore. We have to make sure the systems work, and we need to do it now." Sarah nodded, her face reflecting the same determination. "I agree. The success of the launch was just the beginning. There's a lot more to do. And we will," Musk said, his voice unwavering. "But we're not just doing this for us. We're doing this for the people who will live on Mars one day. For the kids who'll grow up on Mars. This is their future." As Musk and his team worked tirelessly, they began to realize that the Mars initiative wasn't something that could be done in isolation. It would take partnerships, global partnerships, even, to make it a reality. Musk had always been a fiercely independent individual, but he understood that the scale of the mission required cooperation. One evening, he received a call from a familiar voice, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon and Blue Origin. They had been rivals in the space race for years, but now, the stakes were much higher. "Elon," Jeff's voice crackled through the line, "I've been thinking. You and I have had our differences, but this is bigger than both of us. The future of humanity is on the line. We need to work together." Musk paused for a moment, weighing his options. He had always viewed Bezos as a competitor, but the idea of collaborating with Blue Origin on Mars had merit. The challenges they were facing required every available resource, and combining their expertise might be the key to success. "You're right," Musk finally said. "If we want to get there faster, we need to work together." And so, for the first time, SpaceX and Blue Origin began discussing ways to combine their efforts. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. They both had different strengths, and together, they could make Mars a reality faster than either could alone. Weeks turned into months as the Mars initiative gained momentum. The first launch was just the beginning, and Musk continued to push forward, unrelenting in his pursuit of a multiplanetary future. With the partnership of Blue Origin, new doors opened, and the possibilities seemed endless. As the rockets carried more and more payloads to Mars, the dream of a self-sustaining colony seemed less like science fiction and more like a very real, very attainable goal. Musk had always said that it was about more than just rockets, it was about building a new world. And slowly, that world was beginning to take shape. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?